Commander Hyun-woo floated in the zero-gravity section of the research vessel, his three eyes focused on the spinning hologram before him. The planet called Earth looked peaceful from this distance. Blue oceans covered most of its surface, with brown and green landmasses scattered between white cloud formations. A single gray moon orbited the world, casting long shadows across continents that had never seen alien visitors. "Scans are finished, Commander," Lieutenant Ji-min reported from her control station. Her tentacles moved quickly across the glowing panels, pulling up data streams and analysis reports. "The dominant species looks very ordinary. They walk on two legs like the Centauri, but they are much smaller. They live about 80 of our standard time cycles, which is quite short. No claws, no natural armor plating, no poison glands that we can detect." Hyun-woo made marks on his electronic notepad with a stylus. After 200 years of exploring space for the Galactic Confederation, he had seen thousands of species. Most followed predictable patterns. The dangerous ones usually showed obvious signs: massive teeth, acid spit, or thick protective shells. These humans looked soft and vulnerable. "What classification should we assign them?" he asked. Ji-min checked her readings again. "Category yellow seems appropriate, sir. Low threat level. They just started launching small vehicles into the space around their planet. Very primitive stuff. Their biggest ships cannot even leave their home system yet." The commander nodded and prepared to enter the data into the official Confederation records. Category yellow meant the species was advanced enough to be interesting but not dangerous enough to worry about. They would receive basic monitoring and perhaps trade contact in a few centuries when they develop better technology. But then something strange happened. The ship's communication system suddenly came alive with noise. Lights flashed across Ji-min's control board as signals poured in from the planet below. Not random signals, organized, mathematical patterns that showed clear intelligence. "Commander," Ji-min called out, her voice higher than normal. "We are receiving transmissions from the planet's surface." "That is expected," Hyun-woo replied calmly. "All species try to communicate when they first see our ships." "No sir, you do not understand." Ji-min's tentacles moved faster across her controls, analyzing the incoming data. "They started broadcasting these signals before we entered their system. They detected our approach from over 50 million kilometers away." Hyun-woo felt his blood turn cold. He pushed off from the wall and floated quickly to Ji-min's station to look at her screen. The distance readings were correct. The humans had somehow spotted their ship from an impossible range. "Check your instruments," he ordered. "There must be an error." Ji-min ran the scan again, then a third time. The results stayed the same. "No error, Commander. They found us when we were still beyond their moon's orbit. With their primitive technology, they should not have been able to see us until we were almost touching their atmosphere." The mathematical sequences continued streaming in. Hyun-woo studied the patterns and felt more confused. These were not simple counting exercises or basic geometric shapes. The humans were transmitting complex equations about physics, chemistry, and space navigation. Some of the mathematics was more advanced than what many category green species could produce. "Sir," Ji-min said quietly, "there is something else. I am detecting energy readings from their planet that do not match our initial scans." "What kind of energy readings?" "Focused electromagnetic pulses. Directed at our exact position. They are not just detecting us, they are actively scanning our ship." Hyun-woo gripped the edge of Ji-min's control station. No category yellow species had ever demonstrated this capability. Most of them barely knew alien life existed until a Confederation ship landed in their capital cities. These humans had not only found them at extreme range but were now studying them with technology that should not exist. "Run a deep scan of the planet," he commanded. "I want to know what we missed." The results appeared on screen within minutes. Hidden beneath the planet's surface were energy networks far more sophisticated than their initial readings had suggested. The humans had built underground installations that their first scans had completely missed. Defensive positions. Communication hubs. And something else that made Hyun-woo's skin crawl with worry. "Commander," Ji-min whispered, "they have weapons pointed at us." The display showed dozens of launch sites across the planet's surface, all aligned toward their ship's position. The humans had not only detected the alien vessel but had already calculated firing solutions. "How long have those weapons been tracking us?" Hyun-woo asked. "Since we entered the outer system, sir. They have been following our movement pattern for the last 6 hours." Hyun-woo stared at the peaceful-looking blue planet with new eyes. These humans looked weak and primitive, but they had demonstrated capabilities that should have taken them centuries to develop. They had found his ship when it should have been invisible to them. They had analyzed his vessel when their technology should not have been able to penetrate Confederation shielding. And they had prepared to defend themselves against a threat they had never encountered before. Jimin, he said slowly, delete the category yellow classification from our records. What should I replace it with, sir? Hyunwoo continued staring at Earth, watching the small blue world spin silently in space. Somewhere down there, millions of these deceptively simple creatures were probably watching him back, studying his ship and making plans he could not even imagine. Mark it as pending review, he finally answered. I think we may have seriously underestimated this species. Dr. Sujin stepped off the shuttle and felt Earth's gravity pull at her 4 legs. The landing pad was made of some kind of smooth stone that reflected the light from the local star. Around her, the other members of her scientific team adjusted their breathing equipment and activated their recording devices. This was their first time on a planet with such high oxygen levels. The humans waiting for them looked even smaller up close than they had in the transmitted images. Sujin stood nearly 3 meters tall, while the largest human barely reached her shoulder. Their skin was soft and pink with no scales or protective covering. She could see their small teeth when they smiled, nothing like the sharp fangs of a proper predator species. Welcome to Earth, said the human who stepped forward. She was female with short dark hair and clothes made from processed plant fibers. I am President Kim. We have been expecting you. Sujin found this greeting strange. Most primitive species were frightened when they first met aliens. They screamed, ran away, or fell down in worship. These humans acted like they were meeting neighbors from down the street. Thank you for allowing us to visit your world, Sujin replied through her translation device. We are here to learn about your species and evaluate your development level. President Kim smiled wider. Of course. We have prepared facilities for your research team. I think you will find us quite interesting. Over the following days, Sujin and her team spread across the planet to study human civilization. What they found made no sense according to everything they knew about species evolution. The humans showed them museums filled with stone tools that were clearly ancient. Carbon dating confirmed these artifacts were over 50,000 years old. But in the same museums were metal objects, electronic devices, and even primitive spacecraft that were less than 100 years old. This development speed is impossible, Dr. Minho told Sujin as they reviewed their findings in their temporary laboratory. Look at these numbers. They went from hitting rocks together to splitting atoms in less than 12,000 years. The average species takes at least 100,000 years to make that same progress. Sujin studied the timeline charts on her data screen. Every other known species had followed predictable patterns. They developed agriculture, then cities, then basic science, then advanced technology. Each step took thousands of years. The humans had somehow compressed this entire process into a tiny fraction of the normal time. Maybe they had help from another advanced species, suggested Dr. Yoon-sik, the team's archaeologist. I checked for that, Minho replied. No evidence of outside influence. They did this completely on their own. But the rapid development was not the most disturbing discovery. Sujin had begun studying human psychology and behavior patterns, and what she found made her sleep poorly at night. Look at these brain scans, she told her team during their private evening briefing. Human neural activity is unlike anything in our databases. When faced with problems, their brains activate in patterns we have never seen before. They do not just find solutions, they find solutions that no one else would think of. She showed them video recordings of human children at play. The young humans were given simple puzzles to solve, the same puzzles used to test intelligence in species across the galaxy. But instead of following the expected solution paths, the human children ignored the rules entirely and found completely new ways to achieve the goal. They do not think inside normal boundaries, Dr. Minho observed. It is like they cannot see limitations that stop other species. The psychological profiles revealed even more concerning information. Humans had colonized every environment on their planet: frozen wastelands, burning deserts, deep ocean floors, and high mountain peaks. Places that would kill most species had become human homes. They do not just survive in hostile environments, Sujin noted. They seem to enjoy the challenge. The more difficult the conditions, the more creative they become. Dr. Yoon-sik had been studying human history and culture. His findings were the most troubling of all. Every human civilization shows evidence of continuous warfare, he reported. But look at how they fight. This is not the random violence we see in primitive species. Their conflicts are planned with mathematical precision. They study their enemies, develop new weapons and strategies, and treat warfare like a science. Sujin reviewed the historical records. Human armies moved with coordination that impressed even advanced military species. Their battles were fought with tactical brilliance that military academies across the galaxy would study for centuries. But here is the strangest part, Yunsik continued. They also cooperate on a scale we have never seen. When faced with external threats, competing human groups instantly unite. They can switch from fighting each other to working together in a matter of days. The team spent weeks trying to understand this paradox. Humans could be individually creative, collectively coordinated, and strategically brilliant all at the same time. They could adapt to any environment, solve any problem, and overcome any obstacle. On their final night on Earth, Sujin sat in her temporary office writing the official evaluation report. Outside her window, she could see human cities glowing with artificial light. Millions of these deceptively simple creatures were down there, thinking thoughts that no other species could predict, making plans that no computer could model. She typed her recommendation into the report. Immediate reclassification required. Threat level assessment incomplete. Further study needed. But as she prepared to transmit the report back to Confederation headquarters, Sujin knew the bureaucrats would never believe her conclusions. They would read about development times and dismiss the data as measurement errors. They would see the psychological profiles and assume the tests were flawed. They would continue to think of humans as a Category Yellow species until it was too late to change their minds. Ambassador Wunshik was sleeping in his private quarters when the emergency communication signal woke him. The blue lights on his bedside panel flashed urgently, indicating a priority message from the Confederation Council. He rolled out of his sleeping pod and activated the holographic display with one of his 6 arms. The face of his aide, Daehyun, appeared in the air above his bed. Even through the fuzzy transmission, Wunshik could see the stress lines around his assistant's eyes. "Ambassador, we have a situation," Daehyun began without greeting. "The Aquarians and Solites are at it again. The territorial dispute over the Kepler 442 system has escalated to the point where both sides are mobilizing their military fleets." Wunshik groaned and rubbed his primary thinking organ. The Aquarians were a water-based species that needed high-humidity environments to survive. The Solites lived in desert conditions and required extremely dry air. Both species had legitimate claims to different planets in the Kepler 442 system, but neither was willing to share space with the other. "How long have they been fighting this time?" Wunshik asked. 6 months of direct negotiations. Both sides refused to compromise. The Council is worried that other species might get involved if shooting starts. This was exactly the kind of diplomatic nightmare that Wunshik had been trying to avoid for his entire career. When 2 Confederation member species went to war, it usually dragged half the galaxy into choosing sides. Trade routes got disrupted, alliances broke apart, and everyone suffered. "What are our options?" he asked. "Well," Daehyun said slowly, "there is one interesting development. The humans have offered to mediate the dispute." Wunshik almost laughed out loud. The humans had only been in contact with the Confederation for a few months. They were still classified as a Category Yellow species, barely advanced enough to be worth talking to. The idea that they could solve a problem that had stumped experienced diplomats for half a year was ridiculous. "The humans?" Wunshik said. "What could they possibly know about interspecies conflict resolution? They have never even left their home system before this year." "I know it sounds strange," Daehyun replied, "but the Council thinks it might be educational. Let the new species try to help, and when they fail, both the Aquarians and Solites might be more willing to accept traditional mediation." Wunshik considered this idea. Sometimes stubborn species needed to see their problems from a completely outside perspective before they could find reasonable solutions. The humans were definitely outside. They knew almost nothing about galactic politics or interspecies relations. "Fine," he decided. "Set up the mediation session. But keep our regular diplomatic team on standby for when the humans give up." 3 days later, Wunshik sat in the main conference room of Confederation Station 7, watching representatives from 3 different species prepare for what everyone expected to be a very long and difficult discussion. The Aquarian delegate, Ghoulwave, floated in a specialized tank filled with salt water. Her gill slits fluttered nervously as she organized her presentation materials. On the other side of the room, the Solite representative, Essie Kadar, sat in a climate-controlled booth that kept his environment hot and dry. His scaled skin reflected the artificial sunlight from his personal heating lamps. Between them sat Captain Park, the human mediator. He looked impossibly small compared to the other species in the room. No special environmental equipment, no protective gear, no obvious signs of authority or power. Just a middle-aged human male in a simple uniform, reading from a basic data tablet. Before we begin, Captain Park said in a calm voice, I would like both parties to present their cases. Please explain why you believe you have the stronger claim to the disputed territory. For the next 30 minutes, both the Aquarian and Solite delegates gave detailed presentations about their species' historical connections to the Kepler 442 system, their economic needs, their population pressures, and their legal rights under Confederation law. Wunschik had heard these same arguments dozens of times over the past 6 months. Captain Park listened to everything without taking notes or asking questions. When both sides finished their presentations, he sat quietly for several minutes, apparently thinking. Thank you both for explaining your positions, he finally said. I believe I understand the situation now. You both need resources from this system, and you both have legitimate historical claims to the territory. The problem is that neither of you can coexist in the same space due to your environmental requirements. Both delegates nodded. This was exactly the problem that had prevented any solution for months. I have studied your military capabilities, Captain Park continued, still speaking in the same calm tone. Ghoulwave, your people have 47 battle cruisers, 156 fighter craft, and approximately 23,000 trained soldiers. Esikadar, your forces include 62 heavy destroyers, 203 attack ships, and about 31,000 ground troops. Wunschik felt confused. Why was the human talking about military strength instead of diplomatic solutions? Captain Park activated a holographic display showing the Kepler 442 system. If you choose to fight over this territory, here is what will happen. He began pointing to different planets and asteroids. Ghoulwave, your forces will initially establish control over the water-rich inner planets. Kadar, your people will take the outer desert worlds. The fighting will focus on these 3 strategic points where your supply lines intersect. The human traced lines across the star map with his finger. Based on your fleet compositions and tactical doctrines, the war will last approximately 14 months. Ghoulwave, you will lose 60% of your military forces and about 340,000 civilians. Esikadar, your casualties will be slightly higher, 67% military losses and 410,000 civilian deaths. Both delegates stared at Captain Park in shock. Wunschik felt his own blood grow cold as he listened to the precise, emotionless way the human was describing mass death and destruction. The final outcome, Captain Park continued, will be the complete collapse of both your civilization's economic systems, followed by internal civil wars that will kill millions more of your people over the next century. The Kepler 442 system will be left uninhabitable by either species. The room fell completely silent. Captain Park turned off the holographic display and looked directly at both delegates. Or, he said with a slight smile, you could accept the resource-sharing agreement I have prepared, which will give both your species 85% of what you originally wanted, guaranteed peace for the next 500 years, and shared defense against any external threats. Ghoulwave and Esikadar looked at each other, then back at the human, then at Wunschik. The mediation session had lasted exactly 47 minutes. We accept the human proposal, both delegates said at exactly the same time. As the representatives hurried out of the room to contact their governments, Wunschik sat alone with his aide, trying to understand what had just happened. How did he do that? Daehyun asked, reviewing the session recordings. Wunschik watched Captain Park gathering his simple data tablet and preparing to leave. The human looked completely relaxed, as if he had just completed a routine task instead of solving an impossible diplomatic crisis. I do not know, Wunschik admitted. But I think we need to be very careful with these humans. They do not think like us. They do not think like anyone. Within the next few days, similar reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. Humans were offering to help with other seemingly unsolvable problems, and their solutions were always the same: brutally practical, terrifyingly effective, and completely unexpected. Other species were starting to question everything they thought they knew about problem-solving and conflict resolution. Wunschik had a feeling that the galaxy was about to change in ways that no one was prepared for. High Counselor Taeyang stood at the center of the massive council chamber, his voice echoing off the crystal walls as he called the emergency session to order. Around him, representatives from over 300 different worlds filled the floating seats that surrounded the speaking platform. In his 40 years of service to the Galactic Confederation, he had never seen anything like this gathering. The chamber usually buzzed with constant arguments and disagreements. The reptilian Vortax never agreed with the insect-like Chitauri. The energy beings from the Spiral Nebula had completely different priorities from the silicon-based rock creatures of the Outer Rim. Getting even 50 species to agree on basic issues normally took months of careful negotiation. But today, every single representative sat in tense silence, their attention focused completely on the data streams flowing across the central display screens. Fellow members of the Confederation, Taeyang began, we are gathered here to address a situation that threatens the fundamental assumptions of our civilization. Security Chief Yoonji will present the evidence. Yoonji activated the holographic presentation system with a gesture of her crystalline arm. Her species communicated through light patterns that flickered beneath their transparent skin, and right now those patterns showed deep concern. The evidence is overwhelming, she declared, her translated voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. In every encounter with the species known as humanity, they have demonstrated capabilities far beyond what their apparent development level should allow. The first series of reports appeared on the screens around the chamber. Incident after incident, each one more disturbing than the last. 3 months ago, a human delegation visited the Zorvan manufacturing facilities on Kepler 438b. They observed our quantum assembly process for exactly 47 minutes. Within 6 days they had reverse-engineered the entire system and were producing improved versions of our equipment. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber. Quantum assembly technology had taken the Zorvan over 2,000 years to develop. 2 months ago, humans offered to assist with the trade negotiations between the Methlin Consortium and the Outer Worlds Alliance. The discussions had been deadlocked for 8 years. The humans presented an economic model that restructured 3 entire industrial sectors and created profitable solutions for both sides. The negotiations concluded in 4 hours. Representative Klixvar of the Methlin Consortium stood up from his floating platform. The human proposals were unlike anything our best economists had considered. They identified profit opportunities that our computers had calculated as impossible. Yoonji continued displaying reports. Humans who had helped with mining operations by redesigning processes that increased efficiency by 400%. Humans who had assisted with agricultural problems by suggesting farming techniques that tripled crop yields. Humans who had consulted on military defense systems and pointed out weaknesses that no one else had noticed. In every case, Yoonji emphasized, the humans accomplished in hours or days what had taken us decades or centuries to achieve. Their thinking operates on principles that we do not recognize or understand. Representative Velthak of the ancient precursor species rose to speak. His people were among the oldest in the galaxy, with over 50,000 years of recorded civilization. I have lived for 800 years, Velthak said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. I have seen hundreds of species join the Confederation. But I have never encountered anything like these humans. When my people first met them, we thought they were asking for help understanding our technology. Instead they were studying us, learning from us. And now? He paused, his ancient eyes reflecting fear that shocked the younger species in the chamber. Now they return our own technologies to us, improved beyond our comprehension. It is as if they do not see our achievements as endpoints, but as starting points for their own development. More representatives stood to share their experiences. The pattern was always the same: humans would observe, learn, and then create something better than what they had been shown. Representative Quindar from the Hive Worlds described how humans had watched their insect-like species work for 1 day, then suggested organizational improvements that increased productivity by 250%. Representative Mexol from the Crystal Confederation explained how humans had examined their energy storage systems and immediately identified 12 different ways to increase capacity and reduce power loss. But the most disturbing report came from Representative Dux Corps of the Military Defense Council. 2 weeks ago, we conducted standard war games simulated battles that we used to test our fleet readiness. The humans asked permission to observe. We granted this request, thinking they might learn something about space combat. Dux Corps activated his own display, showing tactical maps and fleet movements. After watching our exercises for 6 hours, Captain Lee of the human delegation approached our command staff. She pointed out 17 critical flaws in our battle formations, suggested improvements to our communication protocols, and identified weaknesses in our defensive strategies that our own military analysts had never noticed. The chamber fell completely silent. When we asked her how she had learned so much so quickly, she said that our war games reminded her of chess puzzles that human children solve for entertainment. High Counselor Taeyang felt a cold sensation spreading through his consciousness as he absorbed the implications of all these reports. Security Chief Yoonji, he said formally, what is your assessment of the human threat level? Yoonji's light patterns flickered rapidly beneath her crystal skin. High Counselor, these humans are not malicious. They do not seek to conquer or destroy. They are not driven by greed or hatred like some of the hostile species we have encountered in the past. She paused, and when she continued, her voice was barely above a whisper. They are curious. They view our entire civilization as merely interesting. They study us the way we might study an unusual rock formation or a new type of plant. And that curiosity, combined with their unprecedented learning abilities, makes them more dangerous than any military threat we have ever faced. Taeyang looked around the chamber at the hundreds of representatives from across the galaxy. Species that had never agreed on anything were nodding in unanimous concern. The recommendation of the Security Council, Yoonji announced, is immediate reclassification of humanity from Category Yellow to Category Red. Threat level, unprecedented. For the first time in the 3,000-year history of the Galactic Confederation, the vote was unanimous. Not a single species dissented. Species designation, humanity, Taeyang declared formally. Classification, Category Red. Threat level, unprecedented. As the representatives began filing out of the chamber, many of them were already making plans to avoid contact with human space. The galaxy had just acknowledged that it contained a species unlike anything they had ever encountered, and they had no idea what to do about it. Captain Lee stood on the command bridge of the starship New Horizon, Earth's first vessel designed for deep space exploration beyond the solar system. Through the massive viewing screen in front of her, countless stars stretched into infinity, their light creating patterns that no human had ever seen before. The ship hummed quietly around her as its advanced engines pushed them further from home than any person from Earth had ever traveled. Behind her, the bridge crew worked at their stations with the focused energy that had become typical of human space operations. Unlike the slow, careful procedures that other galactic species used for interstellar travel, the humans moved with quick efficiency and constant adaptation to changing conditions. Communications Officer Sung-min looked up from his control panel, unable to hide the amusement in his voice. Captain, we are receiving an official transmission from the Galactic Confederation headquarters. It appears they have updated our species classification. Lee turned away from the star field to face her communications officer. What is our new status? Category Red, Sung-min replied, his grin growing wider. According to this message, we are apparently the first species to receive this designation in over 10,000 years of Confederation history. The other bridge officers paused in their work to listen. Navigation Officer Jinei looked up from her star charts with curiosity. What does Category Red mean exactly? Sung-min scrolled through the official documentation on his screen. It means we are considered an unprecedented threat to galactic stability. The classification is normally reserved for species that pose existential dangers to other civilizations. Instead of showing concern or fear, the entire bridge crew began exchanging looks of excitement. Several officers actually started smiling. Outstanding, Captain Lee said with genuine enthusiasm. That means we must be doing something right. Plot a course for the Outer Rim territories. I want to see what other interesting species are out there. Aye, Captain, Jinei responded, immediately beginning to calculate hyperspace jump coordinates to the galaxy's frontier regions. Sir, Intelligence Officer Han Sol called out from his station. I am monitoring galactic communication networks. It appears that several species are actively changing their trade routes and patrol patterns to avoid our projected flight path. Lee raised an eyebrow. They are avoiding us? How many species? At least 47 different civilizations have issued travel advisories warning their ships to stay away from human vessels. Some of the more aggressive species are apparently discussing the possibility of preemptive military strikes against Earth. Instead of alarm, Lee's smile grew even wider. She had spent her entire military career dealing with predictable enemies who followed standard tactical procedures. The thought of facing opponents who might actually challenge human strategic thinking was genuinely exciting. Even better, she said. It has been far too long since we have had a real challenge. Intelligence Officer Han Sol, I want detailed profiles of every species that has mentioned military action against us. Start with their fleet compositions and tactical doctrines. Already working on it, Captain, Han Sol replied. But I should mention that most of these species have been fighting wars for thousands of years longer than we have even existed. Their military technology is supposed to be far more advanced than ours. Supposed to be, Lee repeated thoughtfully. That just makes it more interesting. What else are the galactic networks saying about us? Sung-min adjusted his communication equipment to pick up broader signal ranges. The chatter is quite extensive, Captain. Many species seem confused about how to respond to our presence. Some are calling emergency council sessions. Others are requesting increased security around their home systems. Are any of them trying to communicate with us directly? A few scientific expeditions have sent requests for cultural exchange programs. But most of the official government communications are less friendly. Several species have demanded that Earth halt all deep space exploration immediately. Lee walked closer to the viewing screen and stared out at the infinite field of stars. Each point of light potentially represented entire civilizations, species with thousands of years of history, technology that humans were only beginning to understand, and ways of thinking that Earth scientists had never encountered. "Navigator Genie," she said, "how long until we reach the first inhabited system on our current course?" "Approximately 6 days, Captain. The system contains a species called the Zelrani. According to our database, they are a Category Green civilization with advanced biotechnology and a reputation for being extremely territorial." "Perfect. Send them a standard diplomatic greeting. Let them know we would like to learn about their culture and perhaps offer some assistance with any problems they might be facing." Chief Science Officer Boram looked up from her research station. "Captain, based on the intelligence reports we have received, offering to help other species seems to be what is causing all this concern across the galaxy. Perhaps we should approach more carefully?" Lee considered this suggestion for a moment, then shook her head. "Science Officer Boram, careful approaches have never been humanity's strongest skill. We are explorers, problem solvers, and innovators. If other species find that threatening, then we are probably doing exactly what we should be doing." She turned back to address her entire bridge crew. "I want everyone to understand something. The galaxy has just officially acknowledged that humanity represents something they have never encountered before. We are not just another species trying to find our place in their established order. We are something new." The bridge fell silent as her words sank in. For 10,000 years, the Galactic Confederation has operated according to fixed rules and predictable patterns. Species develop slowly, follow standard procedures, and accept the limitations that others have established. But we do not accept limitations. We see challenges as opportunities and problems as puzzles waiting to be solved. Lee gestured toward the star field beyond the viewing screen. Out there are hundreds of civilizations that have grown comfortable with the way things have always been done. They have forgotten that there might be better ways to do things, faster ways to learn, and more effective ways to solve problems. She paused to make eye contact with each member of her crew. "We are going to remind them that improvement is always possible. We are going to show them that there are no impossible problems, only solutions that have not been discovered yet. And if that makes us Category Red in their classification system, then I consider that a badge of honor." The bridge crew responded with nods of agreement and renewed energy as they returned to their duties. As the New Horizon continued its journey toward the outer rim, similar ships were launching from Earth and spreading across the galaxy. Each one carried human crews who shared Captain Lee's attitude toward limitations. They simply did not believe such things existed. The galaxy had lived according to established rules for thousands of years. But now it contained a species that viewed those rules as interesting suggestions rather than absolute laws. The Confederation had created the Category Red classification to warn other species about unprecedented threats. They had no idea that they had just challenged the one species in the galaxy that was genuinely delighted by the prospect of proving everyone else wrong about what was possible. The stars continued to wheel past the viewing screen as humanity began to explore a galaxy that would never be the same.